that's the best way to get it done. And that's how our community and our police are working together to making sure that we have that type of relationship. I mean, we shouldn't just wait till something bad happens. We should be having these relationships, fostering these relationships should be happening all the time to make sure that we are preventive stage rather than reactive stage. So I would just encourage people to call because we have the system in place already. We just need to utilize it and make sure it works. Thank you.
Okay. Next topic, Brian. Are there any plans to expand upon the mobile mental health response team started this past year? What are your plans to address community mental health needs?
Unfortunately, mental health is an issue in our community and our society now, nationwide. So it just didn't, the idea to start the mobile crisis unit here in Johns Creek was very apparent to me by being in law enforcement over 37 years, seeing how those situations can escalate into something bad. So after talking with some of my friends with the state and seeing what the possibility is that we could get one here in Johns Creek, I knew that it would benefit our community. So we will always be evaluating the program, seeing how we can do better, seeing how we can make improvements, and also helping other cities. I reached out to other cities who have contacted me about the program to help them get it started. But the mobile crisis unit, it is definitely necessary. It's a benefit for our community, and it's something that's here to stay. Because unfortunately, not just due to the pandemic, but even before then, mental health was real. What you don't realize is 1 out of every 4 calls, out of every 4 or 5 calls that the police get, deals with some type of mental illness or a person in distress. And those situations will escalate depending on the severity of it and depending on the needs of that individual. So the mobile crisis unit is just another resource that was made available for our residents here in Johns Creek. And we would definitely be sharing the information and making sure that we can help other neighborhoods and other cities get involved and have one by all means. I'm always open to help people, other cities, and also make our unit even better.
I want to thank my opponent. This was a grant opportunity for the city that was made available through the Department of Behavioral Health, and he brought it to the attention of the city. And it being free money, we were free relatively, right, because we're all state taxpayers. But it was something that we immediately obviously wanted to participate in. We have expanded the program beyond just simply what the grant is. We have got Officer Oakley. She is the complement to the mental health clinician, and her job is to be the uniformed officer that's kind of giving some of the legal law enforcement backing in the situations where, you know, the people that they are interacting with, usually it's a after the fact situation. So, you know, there's not a mental health clinician necessarily riding along in the police car. It's more responding after the fact to see what are the different resources that the mental health person in need can take advantage of, whether it's housing or drug abuse treatment or different counseling options. And so I think it's a very positive program. It's something that the city is obviously committed to. It's something that we have got to make sure that we are never falling into this idea of defunding the police, because, you know, if you defund the police, you're always going to have response to 911 calls. And so the first things that would get cut would be the things like training and those different things that are going to be those soft skills like de-escalation training, crisis intervention training. Those are the things that we depend on, and in Johns Creek I think we do a great job of promoting our officers to become as skilled and professional and learn it as they possibly can. And so those are the things I want to make sure that we continue, because Johns Creek has got a great police department.
All right. Trust in our electoral process is critical for our democracy. Do you believe that President Joe Biden was elected fair and square? Do you have faith in our election process, and will you accept the results of this election?
Joe Biden is my president. Donald Trump was my president before that, and before that, Barack Obama was my president. I think that there are sometimes things that get pointed out in terms of voting irregularities. I think that they definitely deserve to be investigated. I think that that's in all of our best interest to make sure that we have got absolute confidence in our elections. I know that there are many people that they are just bound and determined to bring partisanship into our nonpartisan elections here in Johns Creek. I think that why in the world would we want to bring the acrimony and the dysfunction of Washington, D.C. to our politics right here in Johns Creek? I mean, we've got enough problems and issues, and I would like to think some big opportunities to deal with without all of that. And so, when we look at Johns Creek, we are fortunate to be in the nonpartisan election, because in many ways, sometimes I think the City Council is a little bit like your homeowner association. It's bigger numbers, it's more people, it's bigger budgets, but the concepts are the same. You've got taxation, you've got infrastructure and investments that need to be made in the community. You've got maintenance and different improvements that you may need to make sure that your community is going to be meeting the needs of the residents and making the home values stay high and keeping it a desirable place to live. That should be our focus, not any of this sideshow drama that we're seeing on the nightly news. So that's what I'm focused on.
Okay, Brian. Trust in our electoral process is critical for our democracy. Do you believe that President Joe Biden was elected fair and square? Do you have faith in our election process, and will you accept the results of this election?
No, Biden won the election. I voted for him. So, and we must protect our democracy. I think it's sacred. I think it's something that we all know that it's needed for our country. And, what's happening on the national level, what happened in D.C. on January 6th, that was terrible. I mean, it was sad to see that you have our citizens of this country attacking police officers, injuring police officers, and actually gone a little above and beyond what I call protesting, the way they were acting with the people that were injured. The police were trying to maintain order and help us maintain our democracy. But yeah, I believe Joe Biden won the election. I don't think it was any more voting irregularities than any other time. Sure, you're always going to have some issues, but yeah, he won the election, and we must protect our democracy at all costs. And that's why we need law and order. That's why I signed up to be a police officer back in 1982. I believe in law and order. Those are the kind of things that I would definitely do whatever I can to protect, do whatever I can to represent myself as your next mayor in a way that you could be proud of me. That I would make you not only proud of me, but also proud of me being from Johns Creek, being here over 20-something years, raising my family. That's why I'm passionate about being your mayor. That's why I'm passionate about this election.
Hold it there. All right, this is a long question that actually takes a turn. The Newtown Park Amphitheatre, which is relatively new structure, pole barn construction style, has to be rebuilt. In 2018, the residents witnessed an attempt to shrink the size of the lanes on Route 141 under the pretense of safety, only to be found out that this was an attempt to build a 6-lane highway. Just 2 examples of what the contracted Public Works Department run by Jacobs Engineering has done. Does this seem to be a conflict of interest to what the residents want? Why are we the only North Fulton city still using a contracted department?
As your next mayor, I can tell you that that's something that near and dear to my heart. I look at the other cities. I've talked to other mayors in other cities, and most of them, even though they started when we started, like Milton, Sandy Springs, started around that same time, they have scaled back on privatizing their employees, on subcontracting. So I think it's something that we definitely need to look at, we need to visit, because a lot of times those things might not be in our favor as far as making a deal, having a quality work, having a large corporation like Jacobs behind you sometimes pays off, but then sometimes I think we need to look at the bottom line. I mean, you look at what happened at the amphitheater. That's shoddy work. I don't know who did it, but I would make sure in the future when we build structures like that, we have some kind of guarantee to hold the contractors responsible for that type of work, because there was too much money invested to have that kind of work done. It deserves better. Whoever signed the contract, we need to look at the process to make sure we're not making those mistakes again, because it's something that a city like Johns Creek shouldn't have to deal with. We deserve a lot better, and we will do a lot better if I'm your next mayor, because I will make sure we hold contractors accountable, and I will make sure we're reviewing those contracts and making sure we get the work done the right way. Thank you.
So I don't mean to always be up here trying to correct the record. 2 years ago, my opponent running for council said how much he appreciated Jacobs in that contract because it was saving us money. Actually, the truth was that for every $1 that we're spending on one of those employees for their salary, they are charging us $1.75. So there's a huge markup that we're being charged as a part of our contract with Jacobs. It is true that we are the only city that has continued in that model for as long as we have and for as large of a footprint as we have. When we had our retreat earlier this year, when the opportunity came for us to actually look at either bringing some of it in-house or all of it in-house or putting it out to bid, myself and other council members were for doing that. Unfortunately, we were in the minority, and my opponent was in the majority, and so we did not do anything but just the status quo. I will say this, it is going to be forced to come back to council next year. Their contract will be up for renewal. I promise you that I will definitely want not to prescribe a certain solution, but only that we would have all the options on the table. And so there has got to be something that there puts something more between our public works department and the projects themselves. And I don't know if that's bringing it all in-house, bringing the management in-house, or maybe just the director in-house, or going out to bid. But I know that we cannot continue. If you had any kind of service for your home or business that had gone for 15 years, at some point you're going to want to go and look and shop the market. And you deserve nothing less from your city government.
Okay, John. Do you believe that we need more walking trails within the city of Johns Creek? If so, do you plan to use more pervious material to lessen stormwater runoff instead of concrete and cement?
Gee, I wonder who came up with this question. I think it has to be done on a case-by-case basis. If you've got a lot of natural area around then I think that the concrete is probably, obviously it's impervious, but the water is hitting it and hopefully going to the ground. If you've got an area where it's going to sheet off and contribute to the stormwater, then that's absolutely something that should be one of the tools in our toolbox. I do very, very much believe in more sidewalks and trails in general. This is why in our T-SPLOS 2, I was a leading voice that said that we have got to make sure that sidewalks and trails have got to be, and it is, as part of T-SPLOS 2, the referendum that you'll be asked to vote on when you go to the polls, hopefully to vote for me. But that you will have the lion's share, the biggest plurality of the money will go to more sidewalks and trails as part of the T-SPLOS 2 referendum. And the other thing about sidewalks and trails, we have a prioritization matrix. It's something that we use different weighting categories to determine where our next sidewalks are going to be. I fought to make sure that it was going to be recalibrated so that we could get more sidewalks and trails to areas that had no sidewalks and trails. Because we had instances where you already had sidewalk on one side of the street and they were looking at doing sidewalks and trails on the other side of the street. For those of us that live on collector roads that don't have any, we really need at least one. And so that's going to lead to a fast tracking of some sidewalks on parts of 141, on Bice Road, Bell Road, up there to connect Shake Rag to the Clay Creek Park, and just different areas where I think really it's going to be a better return on investment for residents that currently have no pedestrian facilities. Thank you.
Okay, Brian, do you believe we need more walking trails within the city of Johns Creek? And if so, do you plan to use more pervious materials to lessen stormwater runoff instead of concrete cement?
Yes, Tom. I know you're waiting on that answer. I can tell you, Johns Creek is a very active community. Very active. People are walking all the time, they're running, they're riding bicycles. So yeah, we need trails. And wherever we can, just like in Collie Creek Park, we putting a rubber track in there. I don't think you had anything to do with that, did you, Tom? But yeah, we are doing whatever we can to deal with those issues, to make sure we're changing the surface and making more trails wherever we can. That's part of my job as your next mayor, to make sure we meet the needs of our community. By being a very active community, I think our sidewalks and trails need to be expanded. We have certain areas of town where you might see a sidewalk stop in the middle of nowhere and then 2 or 3 feet later it starts again. So I don't understand that. I know we have a matrix in place, but you would think while you have the people out there, you have the workers, you have the concrete, you would just finish that little area there and make it whole again rather than having that empty space and having that sidewalk stop. So as your next mayor, I'll make sure I review all those things to make sure we have that connectivity wherever we can and make sure we're using different services wherever we can, because it not only helps with stormwater, it helps on the joints a little bit too, I like to walk, I like to run, do different things. So changing up the surface sometimes makes it a little bit softer. Makes your joints last a little longer. Less operations, that means less time you spend in the hospital or going to see a doctor, and then more time doing what you want to do, which is actually biking, riding, or walking. So yeah, I'm definitely in favor of more trails for our city.
Okay, so Brian, this is along the same lines related to staying healthy in the environment, but it's a very specific question. What will you do to reduce the negative environmental and financial impacts, such as air pollution and road damage, from multiple trash collection trucks going through the same routes around the city every week?
Well, that's a good question. And that's a question that we've been dealing with. I know I've been dealing with because I'm on my HOA board and we have issues in my subdivision. Even though we only have about 75 homes, we have about 4 different trash collectors that go through there, and we all, every time we try to come to an agreement where we can get at least 85 or 90% of the people together to use one trash collector. Something happens, the price change. So it's hard to get one trash collector, but that's something we're looking at. That's something I will be looking at as your mayor, because it definitely has a wear and tear on our roads and our infrastructure. So, I mean, that will be a win-win, and it's something that our community wants. While on the campaign trail, that's another one of the questions, saying, hey, why can't we do something about having only one trash collector? They're tearing up the streets because those trucks are heavy, they're in and out all day, and the more trucks you have, the more cracks you get. I know we just had our subdivision asphalt paved, but now it's got cracks in it already. And I'm like, wow, how did that happen? I don't know whether it's cheap asphalt or heavy trucks. I don't know. And you never get to, I guess, find out really what it is unless we solve the problem, you know. So we can get one trash collector, or different HOAs can just have one trash collector. Like in my subdivision, I'm sure it would help. But we need to look at the process we have in the city to see if that's something feasible, to see if that's something y'all want. Because it's up to the community, you know, it's up to you guys. Is that something feasible? Is that something that we can live with? If that's something we can afford to do? But I think it's worth looking at, because along with the environment, the climate change and all of that, all that's part of it with the pollution. Thank you.
One of the people I enjoy talking a lot with is our assistant city manager, and when I brought this topic up to her, she, based on her experience in other cities, she said, oh, one of the most contentious, and she said it wasn't violent, but it was maybe on the verge. I mean, she just made it sound like this is something that people get very passionate about, is their trash collection. So I would be hesitant to prescribe a one-size-fits-all solution or prescription for the entire city. I do think that there is the possibility that maybe if we were to get a lot of public input, if we were to do something that would be like a hybrid, where maybe we don't try to say, well, it's going to be limited to one, but maybe we could do things like, well, if an HOA wanted to make it where they definitely wanted to just have one, or, you know, however many, maybe there's some mechanism by which the city could help with the licensing of these different trash collectors to enforce that. But the other thing is that I think that maybe we look at districts, so you don't cut out competition altogether. You don't want to have necessarily all the different haulers going all over the city, but maybe what we could do is say, okay, well, in certain regions, maybe we're going to limit it to a few. So you still have some competition, but maybe you don't have quite the number of trucks, and you have a little less wear and tear on the streets, but there's still choice.
He just wants to walk around. We're getting very specific now. Can both of you state how you voted on the council for, number one, the severance agreement for police chief Byers, and two, the severance agreement for executive aide Craig Kidd? In each case, explain why you voted the way you did.
Okay, so regarding the police chief, this is something that has, I think, people have tried to turn into something for political advantage. As you may remember, the police chief started out with a Facebook post that, you know, really, to say that it rubbed a lot of people the wrong way is putting it mildly. That put him under a microscope, and later we found out that there was a sexual harassment situation. It became clear that he would not be able to lead that department. And so it became a question of, what do we need to do to get that situation resolved and get the police department made whole so that we can move on and eventually get a permanent leader. I voted for the settlement. It was $325,000. I would make the same vote tomorrow, because it was not a fun vote to make, but it was the right vote to make. It was the right vote because we didn't have any great options. It was just simply the least bad option. And so some may say that, oh, well, we should have fired him. Okay, well, that sounds great. But the facts of the matter are, we were advised by our attorneys that if we did that, we would be sued, we would lose that lawsuit, and so rather than paying a little bit now, we would pay a lot later. And so I, again, think that one of the best things that we did is we closed that chapter, because the morale at City Hall, especially in the police department, it was palpable how low it was and the tension, and it was a distraction. And I think it was the best thing that we could have done, which was to close that, allow that department to move on, to heal, to let them get back to the business of policing. And if my memory is correct, I'm pretty sure that I voted for the settlement with Craig Kidd. I have to say I do not particularly remember that particular case, but I definitely was one that worked very hard to make sure that he would be held accountable based on the investigation.
Can you both state how you voted on the council for 1, the severance agreement for Police Chief Byers, and 2, the severance agreement for Executive Aide Craig Kidd? In each case, explain why you voted the way you did.
Okay, I was one of 2 city council members. I voted for termination. And the reason I voted for termination is because the case was clear. Being in law enforcement, I know we have policies and procedures we have to go by, and he violated our policy and procedures, clearly. But there was no internal affairs investigation, and he was not charged. And I objected to that, and I brought that up. I asked why, and I never could get a clear answer why we didn't charge him, because he should have been charged. We have a sexual harassment complaint on him that was confirmed and validated, and I just couldn't get past that because we have policies and procedures in place that we expect for our police officers to follow every day. So you're asking them to follow the policy, but at the same time, you're asking the guy at the top who had only been on the job 3 weeks, and he got $325,000. No, I couldn't go along with that because I knew that was what killed morale in the police department. Knowing that they have what we call a Bible that we can go by every day, just like on your jobs, and then someone violates that Bible and gets away with it, and not only do you not charge them, but you pay them, and you pay them well, because he had only been on the job 3 weeks, and he got $325,000 along with we had to settle for the administrative assistant who lodged the sexual harassment complaint. So we had to pay her too, and they're not even talking about that. So when it all said and done, it was almost $400,000. So, and then as far as Craig Kidd, there was something that was going on right before I got on city council. But the bottom line is, everybody should be held accountable, and there was no process in place for that. So I voted to, give him this severance pay.
Okay, Brian. So this question is really looking for input outside of Johns Creek. Do you think that Keisha Lance Bottoms is a good city mayor, and do you believe she supported the Atlanta Police Department in the best interest of the citizens of Atlanta?
Well, the bottom line is, in my opinion, I believe that the mayor of Atlanta overstepped their bounds by being involved in the police department, because the mayor was making a lot of decisions for the police chief about firing some of the officers without going through due process. There was a process in place for those officers to go through, and instead of her going through the process, A, B, and C, she just jumped from A to Z and fired. And I think it was political pressure that she was under, that I guess she thought that she was doing the right thing, but it only makes things worse. Anytime you have policies and procedures in place, they're there for a reason. They're there to be followed. So there was a process involved. It's called a legal process. And that's why those officers got their job back. That's why they got the job back, and I think she did overstep her bounds because that should have been resolved internal affairs.